It's time for my most requested review, Postal Redux, alongside its progenitor, which I got no requests to review. I mentioned in Postal 2 that I have limited experience with 1, and until I started playing it for review, that was still true. It basically amounted to young me opening up the game, realising it was nothing like Postal 2 within about a minute, and closing it. Young me was strange in what game he went into, probably had better taste than I do now. Plus, to this day, I have this weird aversion to isometric games, especially if it's an action title. I've always felt weirdly disconnected from the goings-on in games like this, and I can't quite explain why. I won't use it against the game just because it has it, unless it uses it poorly, of course. While I did have an idea to do a comparison vid between Redux and Hatred before either game was released, I dropped that idea around the time Hatred came out, and I became apprehensive to review Postal 1 for reasons mentioned. And I knew I'd need to be interested in playing and reviewing the original game first if I was going to go on to the remake. I feel that's only fair, I need to know what's different. So before I sat down to play through the same game twice, separated by nearly 20 years of game development, all I knew going in was the genre, tone, and its ending. If one word could sum up Postal 1, it'd be bleak. An air of misery hangs over the whole game. The artwork is trying to disturb, the music and much of the sound is discordant and unappealing, both intentionally and not. And the gameplay is mostly mundane. Everything fun in it runs hilariously counter to its drabness. It can feel very confused at times. Like, the over-the-top gameplay that had become the norm in 2 is just hiding under the surface. The game, and indeed each stage, opens up with some grimdark, edgy prose written by Postal Dude's edgy mate, Barry. Gameplay immediately starts up with a police standoff, and about 10 seconds later, there are several dead cops and assaulted, or would that be assaulted, civilians. Not much story implied beyond that moving van outside the home, and the fact that we know the dude is a fair man. He waited for the cops to turn up after all. Unlike Not Important, who just went right to it, impatient fuck. Let's do another early comparison to Hatred. I feel Postal's tone was a little easier to take seriously. It's still confused, but there is nothing that shatters it just as hard as Not Important.
Proudly made in the USA, baby.
Rick Hunter is delivering wry one-liners that don't match either characterization we'll see in this review. There are streets lined with missile turrets. There's one of these before each stage, most of which I could only read in a mocking tone. And there's the dude's goofy run animation. Oh boy, I can't wait to kill people! So, what is it that works? Well, it's the background art doing all of the heavy lifting, with an occasional thumbs up from the ambient noise. The painted backgrounds are my favourite part of the game, and I mostly played to see more of them. Hatred felt like a perfectly fine world, filtered through a fuckwit. He'd snap anywhere, even Denmark. Some may find that idea more disturbing, and I totally get why, but for immersing yourself in a game, Postal's world feels more like a place that gave up long ago. It's uncaring and decaying. The Postal Dude is just the first one to break, and from our perspective, it's not even hiding how awful it is. Gameplay-wise, it's an isometric shooter. You'll plop down onto a smallish map and have to kill a certain number of hostiles. You technically don't have to kill any civilians, but human lives are essentially a collectible, and if you want 100%, you're going to have to comb the map, looking for the last sod who feels it'd be too rude to leave, but he isn't nice enough to scream. Each stage is about 5 to 10 minutes in length, perhaps double that if you're planning on exploring each nook and cranny, getting that 100% annihilation and grabbing every last bit of ammo. So, one notable thing before I get into the nitty-gritty of gameplay. I am playing the Steam version of Postal 1, which alongside 2 has seen some updates. Higher resolution options and modernised controls, most importantly. I only found this out after I'd already beaten the game, so I went back to play it with the original controls, and after a few minutes of playing as Tank Man, I was happy to have been uninformed. The antiquated controls still seep through in other ways, of course. The F1 key to jump to the next stage after you hit your quota, for instance, isn't actually a bad thing, but it's definitely disorienting. And then there's the incredible stiffness of switching weapons. I swear it feels like the button to change is not registering at times, and when it does, it takes a solid second. And grenades and mines needing to be equipped made me barely use them. Alongside the fact that grenades are incredibly awkward to aim, and mines were shite. All but one time I did make use of them, I felt like I was going out of my way to do so, rather than being my best option in that situation, so I felt they were more trouble than they're worth. The updated controls make the dude far more mobile, WSD to move and arrow keys to point and shoot. I tried to use the mouse, and it was a fascinating experience. WASD not only moves me, but it changes my facing. The mouse only turns left and right, relative to my facing. The keyboard and mouse are fighting! Alright, I'll use a controller. You don't get to play. Fuck 8 directions, I'll have all of them. So about those controller controls. The human race, as represented in Postal, is not prepared for a man capable of running in one direction and firing in another. They're also dull bullet sponges, so you know what? It's evens. The difficulty here is a strange thing. I didn't mess with the difficulty slider, assuming this was the intended difficulty. Due to the short stages, I did not save scum, and I did each level in one life start to finish. I only died a couple of times. You see, I too am a bullet sponge. The people you kill are a bit of a bore. They waddle about, enemies wait statically in clusters around the map waiting for you to either get close or engage them. So for the most part, you get off the first shot. They can also be trivialized very easily, except on the rare occasions where they're placed in tight corners or come into the map ready to rumble. But enemies are dangerous in odd amounts. The regular firearm enemies will occasionally get off a ton of shots that land, but other times are fairly mad at the air behind me. So occasionally I lose a fair chunk of health in a flash, and at other times I'll sprint through numerous gunfights and come out the other side not much worse for wear. I could never pin down what I'd done wrong in one run and right in another. Turrets, rocketmen and grenadiers are more enjoyable as the fact they have actual projectiles, explosives nonetheless, means it's more a game of predicting arcs and dodging projectiles and their blasts. And on occasion lining it up so that enemies will kill each other in the mad scramble to get me. Rocket enemies are the best in the game for this, as they present actual combat considerations beyond how do I kill this faster than it can even shoot. There is a crouch key purely for ducking under rockets, so whittle them down from a distance but risk getting juggled, or getting close, presenting yourself to more risk, but if they get a shot they'll take themselves down with you, or hope you can keep ahead of their shots. And that's just when dealing with a lone one. When they have backup, they just raise more gameplay options to consider. Health is recovered via pickups. The amount of these on every map is rather small, and their health output is tiny. Armor too only blocks a handful of hits. It means that most of the maps in the game wound down. I dart about until my health was worrying me, and then I go to a boring gameplay style of popping people carefully at a distance, cheesing the incredibly static AI since they haven't quite realised the gravity of the situation. You have to go out of your way to involve people. Take me seriously! Alright, what gear we got? Well, for starters, an infinite ammo SMG, a shotgun, a late game auto shotgun that entirely overshadows the former, by virtue of using the same ammo and just being less shit. A rocket launcher with regular and heat seeker rockets, a napalm launcher, and lastly a flamethrower. Then of course the grenades I could never quite get to grips with. I suppose that's why kick launching is the way forward. Molotovs are stupid powerful, but that doesn't quite balance out how awkward arced weapons are. Then there are the three kinds of mine. I will give the game compliments in that no gun is completely useless. I'd often go back to the starter SMG since while it's a minor irritant for most enemies, it's a minor irritant with infinite ammo and range. Plus it lets me keep moving while I fire. This is my least favourite part of the game. I don't mind it much for the rocket launcher, but why does the shotgun kill my movement when I shoot it? It fails to make it feel powerful, it just makes it operate in a very flow-breaking stop-and-start manner, and it legitimately makes it feel worthless. Fire and explosions, on the other hand, immediately kill everything. I mean, fire makes them run a bit first, you know, spread the love, but they are not recovering. Rockets and eventually flamethrower fuel is pretty plentiful. Well, okay, the flamethrower is the least efficient weapon ammo-wise, but it doesn't matter since a teensy little puff is enough to kill everything but turrets instantly. Voila, I'm fuel efficient. On that note, there is a detail that I like with pickups, in that if you grab an ammo pickup and it maxes out your ammunition, it doesn't completely deplete the pickup if there's any left over, then you can juggle the rest. Pickup. I said that word too much in that bit. Rockets have infinite range, so I can stand at a great distance and just kill enemies with impunity. I could fire off the screen and maybe I'll hit something. Enemies are only aggroed by distance or damage, and it's hard to be angry if you're dead. Okay, so that's what the ostrich line was about. I said I like the look of the maps, and that is true, but in gameplay, they're pretty bad. Their open nature is the one good thing about them. You can choose how to approach most fights from quite a number of ways, and I rarely if ever felt funneled into an unfair situation. You can always back off and reapproach problems. On the other hand, at least one stage just spawns you in front of a whole squad of enemies who are ready and raring to go. A whole street obscured by the map until you wander down it? Sure, why not? I want to get that gear over there, but I can't walk around because a fucking corner hasn't been drawn. I can only wonder what wondrous sights lie just south of this house. Occasionally the enemies can get obscured by the environment. I can't shoot over this box? Bullet collision with the environment is massively inconsistent, and the perspective fucks with me. Until I test it, how am I meant to guess if that's segregating road and pavement, or if that's a wall? Best of luck lobbing grenades around corners. And on that note, you can't throw grenades over that fucking box. Enemies waiting around on the map are fine. Getting shot from off screen was incredibly rare. So yeah, me and outdoors enemies, we're cool. What I'm not okay with is the use of random buildings as enemy closets. It's comical, watching them trickle out in single file, ready to die. I don't mind these until we get to the point where I've got to go door rubbing, hoping to eke out the last few survivors for 100%. And they're incredibly slow, they trundle out. The maps are also incredibly static. Only explosive barrels detonate. I had occasional fun with chain reactions, but cars don't explode. Gas pumps are invulnerable. I got 100% on most of the maps, but in both 1 and upcoming Redux, I did not hit 100% total for the entire game. I got bored of hunting for the last singular survivors on certain maps, and stopped caring. And when you stop caring once, why keep caring thereafter? It will never really be 100% now. Yeah, I became a lazy mass murderer nearing the end. Plus, since not everyone dies instantly but instead goes into a crawling near-death state, occasionally the soon-to-be-dead would be blending in with the corpses until they bleed out. There is an execution move to speed this along, but it's always the same slow animation, and it too quickly gets boring, plus it's impossible to do it in a firefight. I mostly left the dying to their own devices, as I trusted them to get it over with.
Stop shooting, you sick bastard! I'm already dead!
That's the spirit.
The gun knows.
All of this comes together to form a slow slog of a game. Enemies either take too long to die or are just immolated by infinite range rockets or getting whiffed by a flamethrower, which means the most powerful feeling weapon in the game also has no weight to it. And again, them running around on fire almost makes up for that. Combat is mostly psychological. The physical side of it is pretty uninspired, as we've seen. The primary attack of all foes is loading a new voice line or scream each time they are hit, or every half second, whichever comes first, causing a cacophony liable to give you a headache, close the game, and spare everyone inside. Occasionally this backfires and they just stutter the word prick or fuck, and it's vaguely funny and it actually aids me. The turrets though, man, they're so bizarrely out of place and easy to defeat, they may as well just be blokes in wheelchairs, who are covered in asbestos. Plus, with the overall tone and pace of the game, I do actually feel I have to ask, is this meant to be fun at all? Now, this isn't a major concern. If something is fun, I'll bloody well have fun. And I don't play games entirely for aimless fun. If a game wants me to be uneasy, sad, intrigued, whatever, I'll buy in if it does it well, and Postal can occasionally do uneasy well. The ear-piercing screams of civilians, the artwork, the decaying environments, the disconnected, slow, joyless, and occasionally methodical gameplay. But then we've got the dude's lines. I think he's having fun, but it's unclear. And this bridges the gap to things that are fun. Dancing around projectile enemies, ducking under rockets. My absolute favourite part of the gameplay is when I'm set on fire. I'm rendered unable to stop running and I can no longer shoot, plus I'm taking damage. But I can charge enemies to spread the flames. And now this is an actual gameplay decision that needs to be made very quickly. Take some enemies down at the risk of losing even more health, or cut my losses and run for cover. And this guy can throw fire, so he's pretty fun. And with that, we're at the end. A loading screen tells you what's going down next. An elementary school. I knew this was the final destination, but wasn't quite clear on everything. It's a cutscene. I expected to fail to kill children through my own efforts, but that's not the case. The dude charges the school, tries to kill the children, and repeatedly misses, which only makes sense, kids are pretty small. Realizing they're unkillable, he has a mental breakdown. This is where the game draws a line, takes its foot off the gas. We see the dude in a mental asylum, a radio report makes stabs at his motives, a 6-day killing spree from his home to an Air Force base, culminating at a mental breakdown. This marks the only completely straight-faced and genuine story swerve in the whole series. There's no ironic or comedic slant, just a small comment on virtual violence, cutting it before it goes a bit too far. So, all of this killing was building to something. It wasn't something I felt this whole game was worth, but it was something. I thought I was done with Postal 1 at this point, but before I can move on to Redux, I had to look into Special Delivery. It's a pack of 4 extra stages: a store, a shantytown, the site of an earthquake, and a resort. More of the same shooting-wise, but the stages do stand out in some ways. The core game had very sparse stabs at humour. You know, the dude's small selection of lines that, well, he's always meeting new people, so he's not scared to repeat them. Special Delivery ups this a bit. The stage descriptions are more light-hearted. The dude now has stage contextual lines. It even opens with the dude asking,
What? You don't sell Postal?
before opening fire. The colours are more vibrant while still maintaining the overall art style. You can actually see the lighter tone of Postal 2 starting here. That was a small source of fascination for me, seeing the scant things Postal did carry forward from here. I'm not a fan of Postal 1 at the end of it all. It had sparse moments I enjoyed and I can see what it was getting at. I felt the ending more or less worked, even if that payoff wasn't quite worth the time invested. And it wasn't much time as well, it was about 2 hours 15 minutes. I'm still glad I played Postal 1 at least once, however, to see the predecessor to 2. They really are nothing alike in both gameplay and in tone, and Special Delivery does give me an idea as to how that shift began. And now with this review we move from the beginning of the series to its latest release.
Human scum.
I wasn't sure how much to expect from Redux, perhaps an up-res and mouse aiming, both of which were there of course, but we've also got the old stages redrawn. 3 new stages, new models, a new weapon, 2 new modes, a co-op one and a score attack, a whole host of little gameplay tweaks and rebalances. I'm not sure about the minute-long load time whenever I launch, and the few times it seemingly lasted forever. Most games don't go for that. Anyway, besides that, Redux is an entirely improved and better version of Postal 1. If you haven't already bought either, there is little reason not to go for Redux outside of curiosity. I still would not call Redux a good game, however, it's just moved things up from boringly bad to okay, mild fun on occasion. When I first booted up the game and had a fiddle, I realised that my controls had improved a ton, and the enemies were slightly faster and more aggressive, but barely keeping up. So I bumped the difficulty up to hard for this one, as there is now a more direct difficulty select. I died 5 times as much as the original title, but even with the added difficulty, this was preferable to the more empty victories of vanilla Postal. Yeah, pink trenchcoat, let's go! Hard mode also reveals a new addition. On this difficulty and up, the loading screen lullabies have been replaced with a log kept by the dude, detailing his very repetitive thoughts on what's happening. These entries were in the original Postal manual, and this is a bit more of a down-to-earth take on goings-on. Rather than killing everyone cause fuck it, why not, have some pros, he now believes everyone is infected with a hate plague to which only he is immune. It ties the stages together a bit more cohesively, but does boil down to, shit lads, everyone's gone mental and I'm off to the Air Force Base, rephrased 16 times.
They'll all pay.
So both sets of loading screens don't really gel. The first lot are too edgy for someone having this much fun, and this is too wimpy for someone who's clearly unthreatened. This is the original concept art for the dude. It lines up a bit more with these warlog entries. Scared of the world, honestly believes he's the sole survivor of a madness. But that's not what's here. My dude is taking on this hate plague with flair.
Now that's a boomstick.
He wants all of them to see him coming. Shame he dropped that run animation. I'd say hard was a far better fit for this game. The enemies are now actually sort of dangerous, more aggressive and quicker to aggro, but still in a sweet spot where reckless play is possible but risky. And I did notice in Redux, especially now I can swap weapons without hassle, that I was varying up my weapons more situationally rather than just using the flamethrower, auto shotgun and rockets whenever possible. I felt like I knew when I was playing right or wrong a bit more, which is an improvement, being able to actually gauge a strategy. And the game adds a health blip over enemies who you're aiming at. I am ambivalent about this blip. The enemies still felt like bullet sponges, only now I'm not watching them, I'm watching a blip turn from green to red. It also feels like a weird soft lock. Outside of explosions or weapons with spread, there is no point in firing until you see the blip. It's a guaranteed hit pop-up. The weapons have seen some rebalancing, for the better. The starter SMG now has a limited range to make it a bit more of a fallback. It's still useful in a pinch while stopping me from just wearing down an enemy as they try and close the gap. There is a new gun, the hard-hitting long-range revolver. Limited ammo but powerful. It fulfills the role revolvers fill in shooters. And it works pretty well here, slotting into the gameplay well and feeling pretty punchy. Now all the weapons, save for the rocket launcher, can be run and gunned with, so the shotgun is actually not a chore to use. Now it does the things shotguns are good at. Get in, ruin someone's day, get out. A good weapon was just hiding under the surface. The auto shotgun now has its own ammo pool and you get it far earlier in the game. It's limited enough that when I feel I've stockpiled it I can cut loose for a little bit. The original auto shotgun shared ammo with the standard, and you could run and gun with it, and it was more powerful, so it just out and out replaced the starter shotgun. Here, it's just as powerful, but you have to ration it a little bit more. The enemy's increased aggression means that the flamethrower is harder to use while being essentially unchanged. A lot of the strength of puffing them to death was that they were originally so slow to react, I could get in range to do so. Now it's a little bit riskier to pull off. And grenades are now a secondary attack and can be cycled through independently of your firearm. Still a little bit fiddly, but thanks to actual mouse aim, a bit easier to use. There is still a notable delay between stopping firing and being able to throw one, but now I actually felt like using them wasn't going to waste my time or require way too much setup. Fire and explosions are still one-hit kills, and the ammo cap has been increased across the board. Even with the increased aggression, it remains completely possible, if not easier now, to cheese a ton of encounters. Ducking under rockets is somehow less satisfying, but I can't quite put my finger on why. Grenade and Molotov enemies are harder to dodge now as their explosives are less easily spotted with the updated graphics. Still, getting set on fire is fun, and there is a small change that works rather well. When set on fire, you now mad dash towards your cursor. It threw me off at first, but I quickly adjusted to it, and then I realised the genius behind it. It lets you know subconsciously that when set on fire, you have become a toasty human projectile. Executions are still in the game, and each weapon now has its own animation rather than switching back to the SMG. It's still kinda humdrum, not as gruesome as Hatred, and it breaks pace. Postal Redux vastly improves the execution mechanic. The redrawn maps are pretty good. I feel like they've been cleaned a bit and lost some grit. They still captured a depressing tone, however. No more F1 to jump to next stage. Now you actually need to walk to the exit, taking one last glimpse at everything that happened, the corpses of enemies, the scorch marks left from fire and explosions. It's a good time to reflect. On all the other times you walked back and forth across the stage looking for that one prick holding you up. Oh yeah, wait, they fixed the civilian stuttering. The spawn points on maps have also been changed. Combined with the diary entries, this makes the whole game feel like a more interlinked series of stages. The stages themselves have also been given more interactivity. Gas pumps now go up in flames with some influence. A ton of weapon collision has been removed so we can fire through a good degree of things. So in general, combat is a lot faster paced and way less stilted and awkward. The perspective issues are still intact, but overall, this change makes the whole game less irritating. Alongside the old maps, Special Delivery is of course bundled in, alongside one new map, the Carnival, which is a great stage, one of the few to use diegetic music. It created probably my favourite memory from my time with this game. Headed to the stage exit to the repetitive jingle, a nice macabre juxtaposition.
It hurts!
The game also adds 2 stages formerly exclusive to Super Postal, a Japan-only edition of the game with Tokyo and Osaka maps.
Show no mercy.
Alongside this, the game has options for playing the original 16-stage campaign, Special Delivery alone with Super Postal included, or a new extended campaign that chains the two together. This is what I played. So, the last stage is somewhere in Osaka, with the dude following in Godzilla's footsteps. After the Air Force Base, his war logs really stop making much sense, and he doesn't quite question his trip to Nippon. So, all but 1 or 2 things that Redux changes are entirely for the better. It's a slightly faster, punchier game. I still don't think it's a good game. It hasn't been magically transformed into one. The shooting is still a no-frills affair. The simple act of play was not immersive or rewarding for me. Plus, yeah, it may be fast-forwarded, but it was also several stages longer. More background art, but also more people to kill, now clocking in at 23 stages in total. It does all culminate in a different ending. It's a far less impactful but very understandable change given the times. The elementary school is being replaced with a dude coming across a funeral, leading once again to a mental breakdown. Now, it is meant to be read as the dude coming across his own funeral and that causing his breakdown, but I took it differently. I took it as realizing that people hosting a funeral are likely not infected with a hate plague, and tromboners obviously are. And basically realizing that he just murdered a ton of innocent people because of a delusion. It doesn't make any more sense, but I still prefer it. So that's the campaign, but there is also online co-op. None of my friends own it, and the one session I did join was unplayable due to lag. I obviously haven't played it enough to say this is a problem crippling everyone, so I'll just say at no point during my time in single player did I think 3 more people would improve the experience. The Rampage mode is a bit more my style. A score attack mode based around combo kills and varied use of weapons. Plus the stages get some music to go along with the action. It's not bad. With just a little incentivization, I'm forced to play fast and furious rather than tactful, and it makes it a lot more engaging as a game. So let's return very briefly to my planned comparison between this and Hatred. Bearing in mind I haven't exactly come away from either game a fan of them, what would I recommend if you need some top-down civvy slaughter? Well, Redux wins out. Hatred's gameplay is slower and more grounded. I feel there is more potential for a fun game in there with some tune-up and less boring stage design. Much of my time in Hatred was spent exploiting enemy weaknesses out of need, and having very little fun doing so. Gunning down civilians was a necessity for progress, but there were far more on any map than needed, so hunting them down wasn't a slog. Redux is less realistic, faster paced, and more about getting shit dead before it can possibly harm you. While I still cheese the AI on occasion, at times out of necessity, mostly just out of not wanting to bother to confront enemies and get to the end sooner, I could at least make tactical gameplay decisions, and occasionally play the game in a fun way. The stages are also shorter and much nicer to look at, but hunting down civvies is a bit more annoying. The amount on any map is set just a bit higher than the percentage you need to kill, and there is 100%, which in the end was pointless for me, but why did I try and get it? I haven't got a good answer. Redux is the game I've gotten the most requests to cover. I didn't let that affect my opinion of the game, but I can't quite figure out why this, of all games, is the one I've gotten the most requests for. I am appreciative that people enjoy what I make and want my opinions on specific titles, and I hope how long it took me to get to this hasn't been annoying you. Why this one in particular though? I do know my Postal videos have generally gotten more views than others, but this game is on a different continent than 2. Literally. There are recognisable elements and the main character is ostensibly the same guy, the same dude, but the tone is entirely different. The games have different aims and are trying to provide very different experiences. I don't regret playing Postal 1, better late than never, and Redux is a massively improved version. More content and what remains from the original is better, but I didn't come away a big fan.